Rugby documentary alert. Have you watched the New Zealand documentary series about their story of the 2023 Rugby World Cup? It has landed in the last few days. As I record this right now, episode 2 has just been released. I've watched episode 1 and that is what I'm going to give a review of on this video. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Tim. This is Egg Chasers and I'm going to say you should go to the official All Blacks channel and watch the documentary series because I think it's important to flag up and point and celebrate when there's great rugby content going on for free and easily accessible on YouTube. Maybe you'd consider doing the same by giving the video a thumbs up, helping me spread the word, leaving a comment down below, and I'd love it if I would earn your subscription as well. So, All Blacks in their own words. This is something they have done before. Little behind the scenes, short documentary episodes, basically talking heads with the All Black camp, cut together with some game footage and stuff. This one felt a little bit special though, because it was about the 2023 Rugby World Cup, the beaten finalists. I'm going to reserve judgment on what I think about the series overall and what rugby can take from it until I've watched all of it. But what I would say on the strength of the first episode, it's fantastic firstly that they've done it. It's brilliant that it's available for free on YouTube. I know other rugby content has been behind paywalls. I understand why that's the case. I would love more to be easily accessible. So I'm going to say well done for that. I do think this one, my overriding feeling is it suffers from the same issue that the Netflix Six Nations documentary suffers from, and a lot of rugby content on official channels suffers from. The stuff that you see coming out of the official union, like the England Rugby Union, they do some great content there. But all of it, and this I would add in with that, feels a little bit sanitized, a little bit protective, not raw and real in the way that Chasing the Sun 2 from South Africa, telling their story of the 2023 Rugby World Cup was. That was access all areas. It made you feel like a fly on the dressing room wall. You didn't just hear people talking about a great team talk, you heard the great team talk. You didn't just hear about a little bust up or a dispute, you felt like you were in the room actually watching it happen. So rugby needs to get over itself and let cameras and microphones go absolutely everywhere and help grow the game. It's what the NFL does, and it's what South Africa did brilliantly with their Chasing the Sun series. So that's my overwhelming thought. I am really, really happy though that New Zealand have done this. And like I say, maybe over the course of the series, they'll actually open up and show a little bit more of that. How do you tell the story of the 2023 New Zealand Rugby World Cup? Well, I think you have to start at the end, which is exactly what they did. The disappointment of Sam Cane getting that red card in the Rugby World Cup final and the defeat, gallant defeat from that New Zealand team. It's important. I guess I understand why they started there. It would have been a much easier story to tell if they'd won it, to start with the defeat against France on the opening night and kind of, you know, tell the story, we've been written off, we're going under the radar, and then they end up winning. Because they ended up losing, I understand why they thought, you know what, let's start at the end and then we can tell the story after that. So that is what they do. We get introduced to a new character, clearly a very popular character in the All Black camp, someone that I wasn't aware of, Gilbert Inoka, the All Black mental skills coach. I didn't know that was a thing. I wish I'd known that was a thing about 20 years ago, because when I did like postgraduate study in applied psychology, and my dream when I was younger, as well as wanting to play rugby, but it was to be a sports psychologist. That's what I trained to do. I worked with a load of athletes, badminton players, British bobsleigh team, rugby players. I worked with all sorts because that's what I was going to do. But then when it came to it, there weren't any actual jobs doing it. I would have had to have been a university researcher, and I was like, that's not me. So but now clearly there are jobs now, so you know, I could have been working with a national team, maybe another life. That's fine, it's worked out all right, isn't it? But yeah, Gilbert Inoka seems like a good character, and he set up just how big this final was, and I was privileged and honoured to be there. There's videos of me on the channel from the Rugby World Cup final. Go and check those out if you're curious. But it did just set up straight away just what a massive occasion this was. Not just the Rugby World Cup final, but it felt like the biggest rugby game in the history of the sport. And I was there on that night, and it did feel so significant. You had the two greatest teams of all time, who've both won 3 World Cups apiece, vying to be able to call themselves the greatest. It was the rivalry of rugby, a rivalry I'm incredibly jealous about. You heard from people, well, you actually hear from me on this. So you hear from other podcasters and stuff describing it as, you know, the biggest game ever. you hear from the commentators and stuff. You actually hear me. This is me.
The two titans of world rugby, isn't it? Going head to head.
Yeah, that was me. I was the only person that they featured that didn't get a credit. So thank you for watching, All Blacks. Thank you for featuring the video, and I retrospectively give you permission. That was all good. So we get into this massive game, and we cut to Sam Cane in the tunnel. After there was an advert for some shampoo. Then it was just Faf de Klerk in slow motion. French TV directors love slow motion, and it just works beautifully with Faf de Klerk's hair. Yeah, then we get to the tunnel, the two teams coming out for the Rugby World Cup final, and we hear from Sam Cane. We get a thought into his mind, and do you know what? This is so important, what documentary series and content like this does. It makes the individuals that it's really easy to cheer, boo, to have a positive or negative opinion about, say what you want. Suddenly it makes those individuals humans, makes them real blokes that you can imagine having a beer with. And rugby needs so much more of that. In the case of Sam Cane, he was talking about, the pride of leading his nation out, but also giving himself the moment just to look up in the stand and see his family who had travelled from New Zealand to watch, and then get himself back into the mindset of, right, it's game time. And little touches and little moments like that make Sam Cane, a guy who's copped so much stick over the years, makes him just a real bloke like you or I. So then we hear from Aaron Smith as well, his backstory, because they very much hammer home that this is the end of an era. There are some guys that are the greatest ever to have worn that black jersey who will never be wearing it again, Sam Whitelock being one. Aaron Smith being another, who led the haka. We saw his tears during the national anthem that I didn't notice on the night. And then we hear his backstory and the fact that in April of last year, his father said to him, "Make me proud in France." And Aaron Smith looks back. His father since had, between then and the Rugby World Cup, passed away. And Aaron Smith says, "I think he said that to me because he knew that he wouldn't be watching me at the World Cup." So you see what is firing and what is motivating these people, and that it is more than just a game of rugby. Rugby needs so much more of this. So then we get to the actual game, and we hear from Sam Cane. And this was one of the things. Yeah, so Sam Cane says here, quote, "A couple of things hadn't gone our way early on," referring firstly to Shannon Frizzell's yellow card. Now, in the South Africa Chasing the Sun series, which is kind of like the other half to this, isn't it? It's like the two sides of the coin. You get both stories now. You can put them together. South Africa do reference the cards that New Zealand got. South Africa mentioned the cards that New Zealand got. New Zealand don't mention, Bongi and Mbambi went off and we played against a 38-year-old hooker that really wasn't a hooker until a few months before the tournament, and when he was a kid, and he played 78 minutes of a match. They didn't. I understand why they didn't mention that, but they didn't. Sam Cane says a couple of things hadn't gone our way early. Quote, "Didn't go your way." I have a bit of an issue with that. Where's the responsibility being taken? Shannon Frizzell, he's in control of whether he kind of does a croc type roll and drops his weight on Bongi and Mbambi's leg. He's in control of whether he does that or not and gets a yellow card. Also, New Zealand are in control. They also say a couple of things didn't go our way, referring to this penalty that gets given away to make it New Zealand 0, South Africa 6. Andre Pollard slotting over a penalty. New Zealand are in control about whether this player is in the way or not. And I don't know. And then Sam Cane says, in relation to his card, he says, "I was caught off guard a bit." So, right, okay, actually, let me do this in the right order. Before I go into this, let me just say I feel for Sam Cane. Really do. The guy was doing his best. As I've mentioned, he copped so much stick through his career. His family were in the stands, and he talks about that. They travelled from New Zealand, and he was immediately thinking of them. And Sam Cane talking about that was really, really powerful, and you felt for him. But the elephant in the room, New Zealand, is that you had the worst discipline of any team in the year of the Rugby World Cup and during the Rugby World Cup. And that is the weakness which they didn't address. And saying a couple of things hadn't gone our way, I was caught off guard a bit, doesn't take responsibility for that. And you could argue that's where the Rugby World Cup was lost, because they didn't address that stuff. And I mean, it's easy. We can have a conversation about, should Sam Cane's red card have been a red card? Should Khaleesi's yellow card have been a yellow card? All the rest of it. I'm happy to have those conversations, and there's an argument there, but they weren't a surprise. Those decisions were not a surprise because the writing has been on the wall for a couple of years now that sort of a tackle, whether you agree with it or not, is a red card offence. Let me just compare it. Here's some stats for you I looked up. In the 3 years building up to the Rugby World Cup, the world #1 team at the time, Ireland, only had 2 yellow cards. France, who were the other favourites for the tournament, they had 1 yellow and 1 red in the 3 years building up to the Rugby World Cup. Look at Jacques Nienaber, with his physio background. He went on a long process of increasing the flexibility of his South African players so they were able to get their bodies in a position to tackle low enough to evade getting cards because they recognised how important it was. Now let's look at the situation for New Zealand. June 2022, when they lost that series to Ireland, they got 2 yellow cards given away in the opening half hour of that second test, which proved to be pivotal. I was at Twickenham in 2022 when England managed to draw with New Zealand, and the catalyst for England turning it around and winning was a yellow card for Beauden Barrett. Will Jordan got a yellow card on the opening night of the Rugby World Cup against France, and it was at that point that France took control and won the game. A week later, Ethan de Groot got a red card against Namibia, and then we had the World Cup final happening. And also, let's not forget, the game 2 weeks before the World Cup, New Zealand against South Africa, 3 yellow cards, 2 of them for Scott Barrett, 1 of them which was upgraded after the game to a full red card and meant he missed some of the game. And clearly it was an issue which New Zealand didn't address. I absolutely guarantee you it's one of the first things that Scott Robertson will be sorting out. No question. And when you look back at the story of the Rugby World Cup, for me, for New Zealand, as uncomfortable as it might be to take away from this gallant loser narrative, which they were, and they did heroically in the second half, I would go along with that, they did not address what they needed to address. And the reaction of the breakdown in the wake of that Scott Barrett red card in the game before Twickenham, the fact they were moaning about the bunker, the refereeing, and trying to absolve Scott Barrett of any responsibility. I'm absolutely, Ian Foster won't have been doing that. But clearly, there was an issue that was not addressed, whether that's the New Zealand media or whether that was in the New Zealand squad. It was not dealt with it, and it cost them. It really bit them in the ass. Anyway, let's move on. We heard again from Gilbert Enoka, who had his Peter Steph the Toy moment in the semi-final against England. The dressing room was really quiet. South Africa were looking like they could be losing. And Peter Steph the Toy, a man of very few words, stands up and makes a speech which shocks everyone and ignites a fire in the tummies of the South Africans, who then go out and win that semi-final. Well, Gilbert Enoka did something similar, a man who says he stands back and observes, usually, when he's in the dressing room. But on this occasion, it felt too quiet, and he stepped forward and said, think of the story that we could unfold here. Think of the way people would talk about us if against all of these odds we managed to go out and win. And the players, you hear from them, they were clearly fired up by this. Again, how good would it have been to have had the actual camera and actual microphone and be able to actually see this team talk? Instead, we have to hear them talking about the team talk 9 months later. That's a shame. Missed opportunity. Rugby, get the cameras and microphones everywhere. Let's capture these moments because they are golden. Anyway, New Zealand, in the second half, incredible resolve that they showed. An Aaron Smith try that was disallowed. He almost had his fairy tale moment. Then we got the Beauden Barrett score that did go in. And Richie Mwanga, I love the way he talks. You can just tell Richie Mwanga is an elite individual because he says, that was a big pressure situation, but that's the situation you want to be in. It's a privilege to have that much pressure on your shoulders. That is why he was stood on that pitch with a shot to put his team ahead, which he didn't manage to do. Or it would have been level at that point, wouldn't it? Oh no, ahead, 1 point ahead. And then Geordie Barrett with a chance to have won the game as the clock was ticking down, a penalty just inside the South African half. And we know how that one ended. And that is where this first episode ends. I'm really looking forward to seeing episode 2. I do want to say, for all of my sort of criticisms there of the reaction to the cards and stuff and all the rest of it, how good is it that we have content like this to talk about? Rugby needs more of it. Well done, New Zealand. I'll be watching episode 2. I'll tell you, go to the All Blacks channel and watch it. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.